What's up, y'all? This is Hammer here again, back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking about the BRICS currency that is about to be announced. Apparently, they're going to announce this during the BRICS summit later on this year in South Africa. And it looks like the US dollar may be in trouble. Before we get into that, let's get into our intro. So it wasn't bad enough when we heard reports that China and Brazil came to an agreement in which they were going to start trading in yuan instead of dollars, right? It wasn't bad enough when we heard that Russia was going to start trading, was asking to trade more in yuan instead of dollars. It wasn't bad enough when we heard that Saudi Arabia essentially agreed to allow China to buy its oil in yuan instead of dollars. Now it looks like the BRICS organization, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, right? And remember, those are the five permanent member nations, right? You have other non-permanent member nations, right? But now we're starting to learn that they're actually going to announce their own currency, their collective currency, which is going to be an alternative to the US dollar. Now, keep in mind, it is projected that BRICS, probably by the end of this year, if not next year, right, could surpass the G7. And I think based on remember, I think it already has. I'm not sure, but it either has or will surpass soon the G7, which is essentially a group of nations that is led by the United States, right? But here's what people need to understand. Okay, the U.S. dollar has been I will say, one of the main pillars of U.S. hegemony for a very long time. The fact that most trade and most currency reserves are held in dollars gives America immense power over the international system, right? First, they're able to control trade. Second, they're able to cut off trade. Third, they're able to punish countries financially who do not, follow their wishes. On top of that, you have, of course, the Bretton Woods system, which essentially is the foundation of things like, the World Bank, the WTO, and of course, you have SWIFT. In other words, the United States has immense amount of control over the international banking system, the trade on the global stage, and the international financial system as well too. And recently, it has weaponized the control over these systems, right, to get countries in line. And what you're starting to see, a lot of countries want to get tired of that and they say, you know what, America, if you are going to essentially use the dollar as a weapon against us, then guess what? We're going to go our own way. But let's get into the video.
Is the United States dollar under threat? Well, the U.S. dollar became the backbone of the global economy after World War II because of America's robust economy, its democracy, and its transparent regulatory systems, which made the nation seem like a safe place for international investors. But now the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have announced plans to develop a new currency. Their goal is to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar and other Western currencies as well, and protect themselves from international pressure. In fact, Brazil and China have already struck a deal to bypass the dollar when paying for trade goods, which is a major milestone in Beijing's long-term plans to establish its own currency, the yuan, as the dominant international currency.
And before I continue, one thing I hear from other detractors is that, oh, well, yuan can never really replace dollar because, of the massive currency manipulation, which is true. But which I think is a good valid point, but I think what this BRICS currency means is that the goal is not going to be per se for the yuan to replace dollar. The goal is to create a common currency that they can all come together and use that instead. And I think that's what it is for. So it's going to be backed by the Russian military and by America's industrial power. And so in industrial capitalism, right? All of this together, right? You have Russia's military backing it, China's economy, and other countries who are in the global south signing up. All of this, I think, is going to make this BRICS currency a real alternative. And I think what people are not asking the question is, okay, how does this affect the West? How does it affect the average American consumer? One way this affects the West is that the West will no longer be able to use financial warfare, right? One of the main ways in which the West has been able to kind of, squeeze countries into doing its bidding is by financial warfare, right? financial warfare, right? Or as some like to say, sanctions. So if countries don't want to, let's say, import LGBT, if countries don't want to, let's say, side with the ones from Israel, right? If countries don't want to stay on the American line, right, they get sanctioned, right? The U.S. and the West will use the control over the international financial and banking system to go after nations. And what the BRICS currency does, it provides an alternative so that they won't be able to do it as much. But another thing it does is that it also reduces the power of the U.S. dollar, which will also reduce the purchasing power of Americans. See, the reason why an American can go to Africa or South America, whatever, right, and have a greater purchasing power is because the U.S. dollar is the world's currency, right? And because of that, every time you leave the United States, you have an advantage. Once this BRICS currency thing really picks off and countries have an advantage, right, what you will sort of see is that as we get closer and closer to the U.S. dollar no longer being the world reserve currency, Americans are going to feel it economically because the purchasing power will go down. They're not going to be able to go overseas and just spend recklessly as they used to before. And on top of that, what they're going to start seeing is that a lot of these cheap products they've been able to buy, that's not going to work anymore. Okay? Because before, countries would essentially, send cheap products to the United States consumers, right, in exchange for dollars. Well, if the U.S. dollar is no longer a currency, they no longer have to do that, right? And Americans will no longer have the benefit of being able to have cheap products, right, available to them. You will sort of see things get more and more and more and more expensive for the most part, okay? Right? The sort of exorbitant privileges the American consumer has is going to go away. And then on top of that, you add this whole debt ceiling conversation in which the U.S. could potentially default its debt. I'm like, if that were to happen, that would make it even worse. So I think that what people need to understand is that the U.S. dollar and the United States is not going to be number one forever. And all we're saying is that, look, right now, we are getting closer and closer to that point in which America and the U.S. dollar are no longer number one. And I feel like Americans, right, and people in the West are not ready for what that actually means. I don't think people in the United States, especially white folk, understand how much privilege they have, right, just due to the amount of control America has over the international system, right? They don't understand that. I don't think they realize, hey, once the U.S. no longer has that position, a lot of the stuff you took for granted is going to go away. That's the reality. Like you're going to feel the economic plane like in a serious way. But I think another effect is that other countries in the global south are going to rise economically because the U.S. control over the international financial and banking system also allowed it to suppress countries in the global south, specifically Africa, from really developing. And so because of this, if that were to be rolled back, right, you will see other countries in the global south get stronger. You will see the rise of countries in the global south, specifically countries like countries in Africa. So this is a very big deal.
So what will this new currency look like, and what will it mean for the dollar? Well, joining us now is Professor John Quelch from the Miami Herbert Business School at the University of Miami. So the BRICS nations aren't a formal trade bloc. So if they do, in fact, create this new currency, how will it ultimately be used?
So I think what we'd find is that it would initially be used in very large transactions that are government-style transactions between two or more of the countries involved. Just to give a little bit of background here, it is the case that the U.S. dollar has a role that is outsized relative to the 24% of world GDP that the U.S. commands. So the U.S. Dollar is involved in almost 90% of all international trade settlements and around about 60% of foreign currency reserves around the world held by central banks are held in U.S. dollars. So the BRICS nations combined, their GDP is around about 25% of world GDP, vis-a-vis the US now at 24%. And so it's not surprising that these nations collectively are saying, hey, wait a minute, why should our macroeconomic policies and exchange rates be at the mercy of US dollar Federal Reserve decision-making?
So break down what this would mean if this currency does come to fruition.
And so it looks like I was right. So yeah, the BRICS in many ways have kind of surpassed the G7, right? Based on what I'm hearing here. But here's the thing. By 2030, right? By 2030, right? China is projected to surpass the United States to become the biggest economy in the world. Okay? Think about that. And China is right now the leading power, like it's really the main block within the BRICS. So if they set up this BRICS currency, right? They lay the foundation now in 2023, right? It's gonna get more popular. It's gonna get more people, more countries are gonna adopt it, right? By the time China surpassed the US economically, they would already have multiple years of establishing this currency, which they can then use, right, as a way to fully ice out the West. So when they try to say, oh well, you know, the yuan can't play dollar because of the currency manipulation, yeah, but I don't think that's the point. The point, in my opinion, is not for China to carry the entire economic on its back. The point is, if they create a common currency right within the coalition, they can have that be the quote unquote foundation to replace the sort of Western economic fascism, right? So I think that is not going to be the yuan. I think whatever currency the BRICS announced, that's going to be what's really going to replace the US dollar. Because it's not going to be controlled by one country, it's going to be a collective of nations. And I think Americans, once again, have not really taken into consideration how much this will affect their lives. And one thing I really wonder is how are minorities going to be affected, right? Like, yeah, white people in America have the most to lose because, once again, they benefit the most in the country. But when you look at Hispanics, Asians, especially Black Americans who are a minority group, where the only reason why they tolerate all of the racism in America is because of the economic benefits. Well, if the economic benefits are taken away, are they still going to be in America? Could you possibly see like minorities like immigrate out of the U.S.? Like, it's like these are the questions I want to know. I'm like if America's economic prowess is gone, would you see Black Americans immigrate out of the U.S.? Like, these are questions that I think has to be asked. But anyway, all of this is going to be determined in August. I'm doing the BRICS conference, which is going to be held in South Africa. And it's ironic because South Africa right now is in a rocky relationship because the U.S. is accusing them of supplying weapons to Russia. So it's crazy. But you guys in the chat, tell me what you guys think about this. Do you agree with my statements? Do you disagree? Make sure to like and subscribe. And with that being said, hammer out.